O'Reilly. You need parts? O'Reilly Auto Parts has parts. Need them fast? We've got fast. No matter what you need, we have thousands of professional parts people doing their part to make sure you have it. Product availability. Just one part that makes O'Reilly stand apart. The professional parts people.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
Hey, if you guys like to cook outdoors, and you oughta, you should check out the Weber Slate rust-resistant griddle. So this is a carbon steel cooktop that's safe for metal tools. It's pre-seasoned with food-safe oils and ready to cook on right out of the box. It's the griddle that stays ready, not rusty. This griddle heats evenly edge to edge, reaching all the way up to 500 degrees. Get fired up for your new Weber Slate rust-resistant griddle. There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store, or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today.
I'm Casey.
And I'm Tyler.
And you're listening to
the Element Podcast. All right, welcome to the Element Podcast. It's just me today, your host Tyler Jones, missing the energetic, wild, long-haired, hippie, actually very conservative person probably, KC Smith. And we have a live Q&A today. I enjoy these a lot. I like answering questions that are challenging to answer. I like thinking. I like problem solving. And those are things that I think a lot of us like. So not to distract you with all this stuff on the TV, but I've got the TV on so that I can do some map stuff with a live YouTube audience right here. So I'm going to be talking to the YouTube audience and also talking to the podcast. Try to cut out anything boring in an audio version just to help you out, but I'm sorry if there are some of that. There is some of that. But I've got a list of questions here. I'm just going to go after it, and we'll see how long this goes. If you're watching on YouTube, feel free to ask questions, and those will be addressed as much as possible is with the time that we have here. So let's get to. I'm going to give shout-outs here to people who on Instagram, except for one, the first one. Actually, I'm going to give a shout out, but I'm not going to say what his question is. I'm just going to answer it. Jake, actually, Jake Hofer, why don't you just call me or text me sometime and I can help you with your question here. I think it'd be more appropriate than answering in the public sphere, but I appreciate the question. So we'll go on to Danny.J45, who says, quartering a deer versus a cart. Why do y'all use a cart? And so I'll say this. I'm going to answer these questions with speed as much as possible, but there probably will be some dead space here and there. And if that's the case, then I'm sorry, but I just have to think a little bit sometimes, and I don't have KC here to answer first sometimes, so I got to go with that thought process that may be some dead space. So I'm just giving some disclaimers here. But quartering versus a deer cart. I would say that there's a couple of things that determine whether we use a deer cart or we quarter a deer up. Distance can oftentimes be a big deal. So if it's more than like, I don't know, probably more than like 3/4 of a mile, a lot of times that is a pack job, or even a half mile, depending on what terrain it is and all this and that. If it's rough terrain, like lots of rocks or lots of deadfall, obviously deer cart not going to work too great. Even sometimes in really heavy grass, I've had issues. like really big switchgrass and lowland stuff that grows in big clumps, man, it makes the deer cart hard. But if you have like, small grass, short grass, or just like say you're in a oak tree forest and there's not a bunch of undergrowth underneath, I mean, the deer cart's handy because you just put that thing, you don't have to worry about quartering out. You put it on the cart, get out of there, and throw it in the back of the truck and get what you want to get done with it from there. So basically, if there's things that you have to go over, if there's a lot of brush, if the distance is far, then those are the reasons that we wouldn't use the deer cart. Rusty Shackelford on YouTube says, are y'all elk hunting this year? I don't know. It doesn't seem like it. By the way, I've got this here salt gun, and I'm seeing some flies around, so I will be occasionally popping that safety off. So, yeah, I don't know if we're elk hunting. There's still a chance that we get to go, but we have not drawn any tags yet. Our friend Brian, who I think is the guy that might have commented first here, has drawn a really good elk tag, and so he's probably going to actually have an elk hunt on the Element channel because we're probably going to send a camera guy with him because Brian's super helpful, very good friend, and he's going to be hunting some big old elk. Okay, Drake's Creek Collective said, he sent a picture and had like this big kind of story with it. Well, on the story, our Instagram story, you can't see what he's saying in that picture. Like it's a small picture and I can't get it to enlarge. So Drake, if you want to, or Drake's Creek Collective, if you want to send that in a DM, I should be able to look at it better and answer your question. Mike Alvarez here on YouTube says, ground blind or tree stand on a known acid travel area. Axis. Any type of call for axis, ? Okay, cool. Axis. Man, I like being in tree stands as much as possible, but I hunted them off the ground. We've got a video coming out here in the next couple of weeks on the Meat Eater channel. We hunted with Yanni, and we had a great place, lots of axis, and I hunted on the ground and in trees and spot and stalk, all three, as in on the ground, as in in a ground blind. So, there's definitely like a lot of different ways to hunt them. I think it's just really about what you can get away with and what keeps you from getting caught drawing as much as anything, especially. So there is some calls for axis I've never really heard work. We use the Phelps Easy Sucker, I think, and there's a way that you can make it sound like those axis do when they're like the does are calmly calling to each other, just kind of like real nice and relaxed, and it will stop a deer. If you want to shoot at a deer, at a relaxed deer, it'll stop a deer. And it'll oftentimes it will calm them down when they get spooked. But the guys that we hunted with never have seen it actually like call them in. So there's that for you. Let's go back to Instagram messages here. Caleb Allen, tips on picking a property to hunt in a big unit, e-scouting. What to look for. And I'm going to try to stay away from areas or states as much as possible here, but give some thoughts about what I know the state potentially looks like or the habitat or whatever. And here and there I may still say something, but just going to kind of go for this. So the question is picking the property. Big unit, man. You really just have to, and this is how I kind of e-scout, but I look at a big area or whatever. Here, let's just go to the live, or to the maps here. And for those listening, on the podcast, I'm sorry you won't quite get to see this. I hope this is viewable for y'all. Let's just go to Indianapolis here, or Indiana. So, like, if I'm looking at, like, say, the whole southern Indiana, that's how I look at a state sometimes when I go, is I just do it like this, right? And there's Indianapolis in the middle. If you can't see, my cursor, my crosshair is on this dark stuff here. I don't know what that dark stuff is. If I'm inquisitive, I might just go look at it real quick, and it's possibly, for me, when I'm looking at it, first thing I think is pines. But then when I zoom in, it looks like just oaks, and it looks like what it is a bunch of draws. So it's just really ravenous, I guess, or not ravenous, ravine type country. And so it doesn't get planted very much. But you look over here, this is ag. Like you see these light spots, right? Oh, there's definitely a lot of ag in there. So I guess it depends on how you want to hunt. Do you want to hunt if you hunt a deer in here, like you have a decent chance that this stuff is remote enough that and maybe even small enough property or big enough properties that like you can find a big deer. There just may not be a big density of deer or high density of deer. But there may be big deer that are old in that stuff. You might have a lot more people that hunt this stuff because like per acre of cover, right? So there's less, there's a lot more deer per acre of cover, but not as much cover. So when you get in the cover, you might have a great hunt and see a bunch of deer. They've got a lot of food there. So you almost don't have enough cover down here to even fit all the deer that could potentially be fed in this country. So some things to think about that I always think about when I'm looking at maps is that. Also, like, the creek systems and stuff are good to look at. Some big secondary creeks like this, looking at where crossing might be on this stuff. I don't know, you're not going to be in that type of country probably, but like just go to like, let's just do like a plain state or something. Here's Colorado, bunch of public. So like if I'm looking at this stuff right in here and I'm looking at the public just around, I find a piece of public, I zoom in, and and I guess to find in a big unit, you would be like, okay, well, where are some public places that I can either get away from people or find something that's, overlooked, right? Like something like this could be overlooked. It's small, right? There's two draws. I mean, typically, see, this is parking right here. So it's not as remote as you want because there's another that may be parking too there. You just got to figure that out. Actually, it might not be because that might be a homestead. So you may not be able to park there. Oh, yeah, there's parking right there where my cursor is. So you got a pretty good distance here that's 0.7 of a mile. So you can get away from people, right? There's also some ag here that these things might be potentially coming to. So, trying to find how deer are traveling through here might be something, that could be a little bit overlooked because this may be a smaller piece of public or something like this. Same thing, smaller piece of public, lots of cover. There may be deer hanging out, right here crossing this little shallow spot right here. And they might be hanging in all this thick stuff around this river or something like that, going to this cornfield right here. So that's how you find like overlooked stuff. If you want to find, deer that are going to have a little more guarantee of being there, you find something big that you can get walking a mile or more probably on. But overall, just looking at these units and just saying like this, I would say, oh, there's a bunch of public up here, right? There's a reindeer right there. And then there's some smaller stuff down here. And I go through and I start marking stuff. And so immediately I mark stuff and I put a note at the least of what I was thinking when I marked that spot. Why do I like that spot? Well, looks like a trail crosses a fence right there and goes to that ag. Could hunt on X wind, right? I do that. And then I actually blue mark, as in like blue ribbon, my very like spots that I'm like, oh, that is where a deer is for sure. That's the stuff that I blue ribbon mark. Everything else is white unless I've seen it with my eyes, and I usually use red. That's kind of my color system there. So good question. And I think, big pieces of public are going to attract people. So just keep that in mind. There's going to be people attracted to those. It doesn't mean that you can't kill a deer there, though. That's for sure. Let's go ahead and tune this down. We don't need to see, what's his name? Ryan Gosling. That was Caleb Allen. Hunter Kelly. Hunter_Kelly_FP. I'm hunting public in Florida for the first time. Beginner tips for scouting. So a lot of the things I just said would apply, right? Also, in Florida, or anywhere I go, I'm always like understanding a couple of basic things. One, the deer is going to eat several times a day. So where is it going to eat? What is it going to eat? What's the most preferential thing? And a lot of times an ag field is a preferential thing because not necessarily because it's the most tasty, but because there's a ton of food there and the deer doesn't have to go far and just can gorge, right? So a lot of times they're going to end up in a destination, field at night. That's a big ag field. So something to think about. If you're not near ag, which a lot of Florida isn't, and I don't know Florida's a big state. You got to kind of try to understand what the food source is that's native or wild that they like. And I don't know what that is in Florida. But if you know kind of time of year and what's going to be preferential then, whether it's acorns or whatever, then know what an oak tree looks like on the map. Go out and see it in person, look at it on the map and go, that's what oak trees look like. That's an oak tree motte. I'm going to go hunt these live oaks, So that's what I'm looking for first is like, what are they going to eat? Because it gives you a good sense of where they're going. But if you're going to be hunting the rut, then that doesn't matter quite as much. I still base a lot of my stuff in the rut around that, but I don't feel bad about going just into the deep woods and sitting in a place where there's two big sections of timber and they kind of have like a little funnel right here and sitting right there in the middle, no matter what's around me, even if it's just cattle pastures on both sides and there's no food source. So stuff like that, anything like creek systems or river systems, deer are going to move up and down those in the rut or, all times of year, but especially during the rut. So that's kind of some starting points for you. I hope that helps.
O'Reilly Auto Parts are in the business of keeping your car on the road. O'Reilly Auto Parts offer friendly, helpful service and the parts knowledge you need for all your maintenance and repairs. If you're confused about what part you need, like what wipers are going to be the best, what replacement headlights are going to be the best, go into O'Reilly and talk to the people that work there because they're great and they're super friendly and they'll get you squared away where you walk out knowing you got the right thing. They've got thousands of parts and accessories in stock, either in-store or online, so you never have to worry if you're in a jam. Do you need your windshield wipers replaced? You need a brake light fixed? You need some quick service? They'll help you find the right part or point you to the nearest local repair shop for help. The professional parts people at O'Reilly Auto Parts are your one-stop shop for all things auto do-it-yourself, and you can find what you need in-store or online. Stop by O'Reilly Auto Parts today or visit us at O'ReillyAuto.com/MeatEater. That's O'ReillyAuto.com/MeatEater. Hey, everybody knows Weber grills. I've been using Weber grills my whole life, and check it out. They got a pellet grill, the Weber Searwood pellet grill. Now, with a pellet grill, you can smoke, roast, and sear, what I like to do, on the same grill. You can go from low and slow, on smoke boost mode, which gives you great smoke at 180 degrees, or crank this thing all the way to a heat sear at 600 degrees. It's got a full great sear zone, so you can put more food on the flame. This is my way of bold saying. If I was going to cook roast one way, that's how I like to do it. Sear roast. Utilize the smoke boost setting to intensify that smoky flavor. Direct flame cooking creates searing, crisping, and browning. Food is going to look as good as it tastes. This grill gets hot in 15 minutes. Cleanup is easy. Cook confidently with intuitive digital controls at the grill and enjoy the sleek, easy-to-use surface. You can also add a heavy-duty rotisserie or rust-resistant griddle insert to up your game. Get fired up for your new Weber Searwood pellet grill. There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today.
let's go back to YouTube real quick. There's some questions here. Ellie, 7-on-7 Reigns, 8th grade team running back. What's up, dude? Riley Schreiner says, for a 9-day out-of-state rut hunt in Ohio, how many days would you spend boots on the ground, scouting, and what would you be looking for in terms of sign and terrain features? So, similar thing with Ohio that we just looked at, because we looked at Indiana, right? Indiana is very similar and very close to Ohio in a lot of ways. And the two things that we just looked at are very similar as well. Where Ohio, I think a lot of the southern portion of Ohio, which I've been to Ohio, but I've never been there. I've only been there in a deer hunting context one time, and I wasn't hunting, I was scouting. It was off season. The southern portion, I think, is pretty wild country, big woods, and then a lot of that stuff in like the central portion of the state becomes more ag type stuff. So I guess it depends on where you're going exactly. If you're doing this all 9 days, you're not going up there to pre-scout anything. I don't spend a lot of time boots on the ground anymore. I spend more time with my truck trying to figure out where's the hunter pressure, where are the deer, can I find out where deer are crossing and going to ag on a road, right? Because then 45 minutes before that, you might be able to kill them in that property somewhere. That kind of thing is what I'm more thinking about. So I'm driving a lot, trying to see properties. Also, you can see which properties you can't see into versus which properties you thought were secluded, but you actually can see all the way down to the bottom of that ravine from this part of the road. So deer are not really going to do anything before dark in that property. So that's usually what I do more of. And I mean, to me, like, I have my spots on my maps picked out well ahead of time, and I don't hardly ever have, excuse me, I don't ever hardly go to a place where I don't have enough spots picked out on the map that not very often do I have to go pick more spots on the map before, like, once I go, I have enough spots that one of them is going to work out probably. And sometimes that's me having to walk a mile, right, or whatever to hunt, and that's a long ways. But if I can kill them closer than that, then I'm probably checking those places out first. And then if I don't think they're going to work out, then I'll start going deeper, and I'll just go in there, and scout my way in down this creek system or down this draw or across, there's 2 saddles up there. Let me check the first one. If I don't like the sign in it, then I'll go check the next one. Maybe there's a big, massive, signpost rub at the top of that saddle that lets me know that they're cruising up and down through that saddle. So I would say really it's just a matter of, like, once you find a place that you feel confident in from your map stuff, and then you go in there with boots on the ground and you find out that there's good sign in there, and then you have a hunt in there. I mean, I would hunt pretty immediately if it looks good, fresh sign. And then if you have a good hunt in there, just stay there, stay at it until you need to go find something else, or you don't like it, or the wind causes you to need to find something else. It's a good question. I hope that answers it. If it doesn't, or if you need more clarification, just comment again there on YouTube. Let's go to Jake Peters from Instagram. When setting up trail cameras on public where legal, by the way, I think it's kind of a clown show that trail cameras aren't legal on public. That's a bold statement, but I'm just going to say, guys are coming and spending their time, their money from out of state oftentimes to hunt, public land, spending that money. It would be nice if we could, feel confident about the spot we go in on, so that we don't spend our 5 days off just spinning our wheels and have to come back, tell our wives why we didn't see any deer and why we need to go do that again next year or next month or whatever, So he said, should I be setting up on signs such as scrapes or on travel corridors and game trails? With setting up trail cameras, that is. Man, I don't know. I would say depends on what you see when you go in there, but I love a scrape camera. I think it's it's a fun thing to see and watch. I've killed a deer on the first sit in Illinois off of a scrape camera. And that scrape camera gave me the confidence to go all the way up there and hunt. It wasn't a cell camera either. I had a friend that checked it for me. And it gave me confidence to go up there on the right conditions and hunt that location. And that night I shot what could be the biggest 8-point of my life, like a legit 150s class 8-point. So scrapes are awesome. But we have a lot of cameras on game trails, I'd say, or in travel corridors. But I mean, never just in the travel corridor. It's usually, well, maybe every once in a while in a travel corridor. We have these things we call DMAs, deer movement areas, that are like, you can tell deer move through this area, but it may be 100 yards wide. And that rarely happens except for like on Texas Public, where it's just terrible and the deer are lightweight and they don't put a lot of sign down. But usually almost always trying to put it on a trail. And if you put it on the trail, don't set it up at a 90. Set it up shooting down the trail at like a 45-ish. That way the deer's not looking into it too much, and it's catching them, moving before it actually frames them up and takes a picture. Whereas, like, especially in the rut, if you have it at a 90, you're going to have some false triggers, what seems like false triggers at least. Let's see. Another question from YouTube. Wanted to introduce my 10-year-old son into bow hunting. Is there a bow you'd recommend? I know there are kids' bows, but do I invest in something he'll grow into? I'd say no. I wouldn't give him a big bow. I'd give him something he can pull back, because I know I was 13, could barely pull back 45 pounds, So, I mean, unless your son's really big and strong, I would get him a kid's bow, and they got them that'll shoot, 50, 60 pounds or whatever, all the way down to like 30, I think. So, like, or less. I mean, so maybe you guys probably can answer this better than me in the chat. Let's go back over here to Instagram. Zach Beasto, Zach _Beasto says, tips for big guys using saddles. I'm 6'6", 307. Okay, first thing I would say is you have to lose 8 pounds, because it's a 300-pound max on a lot of this tree stand equipment and saddle equipment. Now, granted, I've had people in that industry tell me that it's 300 pounds rated, but it's like legit, like thousands of pounds can be on those things, and I mean, like, they don't even break. They have to like break them at a certain point, and whatever the lowest point they break it at, they have to like divide it by 5 or something, to get to their max weight that can be on it. So, but I would just for liability purposes maybe lose a little bit of weight if you can. But when you're 6'6", man, I know 307 don't look like big. You know what I mean? You probably look like just a corn-fed, just deer hunter. You know what I mean? But anyway, yeah, I would try to get that down just a little bit, and then I would use Cruiser is who we've used for a while now. It is the most comfortable saddle I've ever put on. I've probably put on 4 or 5 different brands. Not that the other ones wouldn't work. And I mean, in 2020, I used it tethered. It was great. Killed a bunch of deer out of it. KC didn't like it quite as much as I did. But that Cruiser has like 3 different sizes, and they can really get you dialed on that, like which size you need, which would probably be, I can't remember if it's 3 is the biggest or 1 is the biggest, but they'll let you know. And then it's really comfortable. It's pleated, and so it can really like go up your back and down towards your knees too. It's not like real thin, so across your butt. But anyway, and he also says, Zach says, The Element is one of the best shows on TV and one of the best podcasts, right along with the Meat Eater podcast and the Bear Grease podcast with Clay Newcomb. Y'all rock. Keep it up. Thanks, man. That's very encouraging. I really appreciate that, man. It means a lot. Let's go back over here. I probably should have pulled that map out on some stuff already again, but let's see. Back over here to YouTube. Michael Mooneyham, what's your layering system to stay warm in bitter cold? I get cold here in Texas and have a hunt coming up in Illinois. I don't want to get puffy and ruin a shot with a bow. I would say that apparel-wise, I would buy the best stuff I can afford, because it's going to keep you the warmest with the least amount of layering. I almost always I don't know. You may not be hunting on public land or whatever in Illinois, but for the sake of, I think the weight to warmth ratio on a puffy jacket is about as good as it gets. And so First Light has a couple different options there. One is called the Brooks Down, and it would be something I would probably wear under because it's got that puffy outer thing that's a little bit loud, louder than typical whitetail wear. But essentially the Source, and I don't know if this stuff is released yet or, yeah, it's I guess it has released. I don't know for sure, maybe not. Some of the stuff that I have that's like it's like the Source but more warm from First Light. Those things are coming out and maybe have come out. I'm sorry, I don't know for sure, but I would say that, which by the way, this podcast is brought to you by First Light. Anyway, that stuff is really nice. And it's supposed to be just like the same as a puffy. It's got the interior of a puffy, but it's way quieter on the outside and durable. A little more durable, I think. So that's good stuff. The Source jacket, great mid layer for sure. And I use it all the time. But it doesn't quite feel like it squishes down quite the same as like an actual puffy. And I think it's because of that tougher outer layer. But it will squish down. And I would use, like, I love puffies for warmth to weight, taking stuff in. Also, any of the stuff that you buy that's high end that is built for like the bitter cold, like their cold stuff, man. That's the stuff to get into, man. That stuff it's going to work for you. But I also use a lot of small layers in merino. I'll wear several merinos. I mean, I'll literally have 5 like light to mid-weight merino type layers on before a jacket sometimes. Like essentially I got like a heavyweight merino, I guess, or whatever they want to call it, as like my last of those 5 sometimes. And then I'll have like, a sweatshirt and then a big jacket or a medium jacket and then a big jacket. And sometimes you just get puffy, man. That's just the way it is. Just got to try to keep that left arm from being too puffy. So vests are good. I'll definitely look into a Source vest for layering and keep that left arm as a bow hunter from getting too puffy. Also, I'm not a big bibs guy, but that's what First Light carries. I like coveralls a lot, actually, but I just don't. I don't use them anymore, but I think a big coverall is kind of a cool thing to have to put on over the top of everything and just keep all the warmth in and nothing leaks out the midsection or nothing, Will _Harrison, tip on hunting North Texas or South Oklahoma blackjack country in Post Oak region. So I don't love blackjacks, actually. I don't know how preferential those acorns are. And I know that the trees are almost impossible to hunt out of. I'm more of a Post Oak guy. I would say, man, I hope I don't have to pee here in a second. I'm sorry, y'all, if I do. But I would say on that stuff, tips on hunting that stuff. I would say Post Oaks are your friend. If you can get into river or creek bottoms that have, like young ash trees, that to me, those are like deer love to browse ash trees. And that's something that a lot of that country has in it. Depending on North Texas is a big region, right? So, but it's Post Oak country, but still lots of different things going on there. But you might see a lot of hackberry trees, a lot of elm trees. You're going to see mostly cattle pastures, no ag food sources. So acorns are kind of key. If you can find shoemart oaks, those are a great early season food source sometimes. Look them up and check those out. What else? I would say, there's a bunch of tips that I could throw out there that are general whitetail hunting tips, but sometimes you can find it hard to find edge that's not on the map. But if you can find edge that's not showing on the map super easy, that's where you're going to see guys, like you won't see stands if you see an edge or a funnel or a pinch point on a map, there's a high chance there's a stand there. Who knows if it's been hunted or if it's being hunted this year or whatever, but there's a high chance in that country that there's a stand there. I mean, there's just too many hunters in Texas. And so I would say, like, anything you can find that's really subtle on the map, or even that you can run into while you're out there paying attention to where you're going in and out, pay attention to what you're seeing. KC's really good at that. That'll help you a lot. Sorry, if you have a little more detail on what you're kind of looking for, I can try to help you too. And then shoot low, because those deer are pressured and small and move fast. Okay. Y'all, I say 100,000 times, so you're welcome, because you're going to now notice that for the rest of the podcast. Let's see. Back on YouTube here, Bri McDowell says, when using water access, how far are you willing to roam from the boat? Long ways. Buck truck, we hunted with Clay Newcomb in Arkansas, and from the creek that I drug my deer out to, which I shot a doe, so it wasn't crazy or nothing. It wasn't super hard, but it was like 600 yards, which isn't terribly far, but I mean, I would go a lot farther than that. I think that if you want to make hunting easier for yourself, then you use a boat and don't go very far, because the boat is the thing that gets you far in, right? You make it good by doing that. And I have my friend Scott, he hunts like right next to the creeks and the rivers sometimes when he's using boats, or right on the lake shore. He does that a lot, and I think it's good. I think it's fine. But if I feel like I need to boat into a place to get to this spot that's a mile in, I'll go do it. In fact, one of the days on that buck truck episode, Clay and Casey and I all ended up together. I walked like a couple of miles that day probably, but probably walked 3/4 of a mile in farthest. Okay, back on Instagram here. Charlie Vanderbleek, he had several questions, but one of them was, where should I focus my time and energy? Bedding areas, food? Where are the deer going early? And I'm thinking early means early in the season, not early in the day. But I would focus your areas on bedding areas and food, or your energy on bedding areas and food. I would spend time in between those two things more often than not. And maybe closer to the bedding areas than the food oftentimes, but it just depends a lot on whether you're hunting private, whether you're hunting public, how pressured the public is, how pressured the private is. Early, those deer will be closer to the food source in daylight probably than they will later, but once the rut hits, you can also hunt real close to the food a lot of times, especially if does are around that food, because that's where you want to be, is near the does. So yeah, I would focus my energy on finding the bedding areas, finding the food, figuring out how they're getting there, and, hunting them in a spot where you can shoot them in daylight. But those are definitely, that's the key, man, especially early. Where are the deer going early? Deer are going to green food sources really early. They're spending time in corn country a lot of times, early. So corn actually makes things really difficult early. A lot of times in my experience, where deer will bed in the corn, they'll water in the corn because it's on a pivot, and it creates pools and stuff down in there that, puddles and whatever. So they don't ever need to leave for water. They got food there and they got cover, and so there's no methodology to their movements, and it's very tough to predict what they're going to do. But hunting on the edge of corn, if the corn's still in, they got cover, they go up and down the edge of that stuff sometimes, because that's the kind of the only place that they can walk really unimpeded. So if they are going somewhere, down the edge of that corn's a pretty good place. Be ready for a 5-yard shot straight down, and make sure you're bent at the waist. Back over here to YouTube for questions. Vinny says that bow, bear legit is a good option, he says, I guess, for the bow. Bobby says, sup, everybody. Let's see. We're going to go ahead and remove this guy. There's somebody being inappropriate. We've got, you have one broadhead for deer, Vinnie Collins, for the rest of your life. What is it? Man. I'm just going to say it's the one I've been shooting the last few years. So if you've watched any of our YouTube stuff, it's just a big 3-blade front deploy, pretty well made, decent, components broadhead, front deploy mechanical. 2.5-inch cut, I think is what it is. And I'd probably just keep shooting it forever because I killed, if you're on YouTube, you can see this, but that Neil guy right there killed it with that broadhead. Big, huge mechanical broadhead, and it stuck so hard in the spine from a frontal shot that I couldn't get it out. I had to unscrew the arrow. Okay, next question on Instagram. Charlie again. I hunt a chunk of private. It's going to be beans this year. Should I focus early on the field? Yeah, I would. And if you're not seeing deer in daylight, then back off. Get closer to public, or get closer to bedding. But I'd hunt that field if I could, for sure. And, I mean, who knows how early you're talking about, but September, I think late September, if the beans start getting kind of yellow or whatever, I think they still will eat them, but they might move to different food sources. So, one more on Instagram right now before we go back over to YouTube. Hunter Kelly says, what saddle for my first saddle? I'd go back to what I told Zach earlier, but that cruiser saddle is just hard to beat. It's very comfortable. And so, I mean, if you want to for sure be comfortable, I'm not saying that the other ones won't fit your body type or whatever well, or even better maybe. I just know that a lot of people have discussed online and as well as in my camp how comfortable those cruisers are. Back over here to YouTube. Are there any Alaskan trips in the work for the Element? No. We can barely afford to go deer hunting, man, unfortunately. Vinny wants to know what my biggest bass is. I caught a 10 1/4 on a spinnerbait in Lake Fork a long time ago, probably 15 years ago. But I've caught several that were pretty close. I mean, I caught a couple that were pretty close. I caught a 25-inch fish, and he didn't look skinny, but he was kind of just spawned out May 30th, I think, one year out deep on a Carolina rig. And I mean, it was thin if you looked at it from the top, but not thin if you looked at it from the side. So, but it didn't go 10. It wouldn't go 10. So can't call it a 10. Back over to Instagram. What info, says Charlie, can I get from cell cams that is overlooked? I think that a lot of people, and I'm probably guilty of it sometimes, not necessarily in my own trail cameras, but people will show me trail camera pictures sometimes, and I'll be like, oh, you ain't killing that deer. Why is that, y'all? If you're on YouTube, give you about 5 seconds to answer that. But that's my thought, is immediately like, okay, that deer, it's just fun to look at. But the reason is because the pictures are at night, and they're all at night. So you've got the rut window, theoretically, to help you out, give you a chance there. That's your best chance. But a lot of times, the overlooked info on these trail cameras is there's a window right after dark where, like, even in the last moments of shooting light, the picture looks like it's at night, but it's not. It's still shooting light, right? Well, you give it another 45 minutes or hour from that moment, and those deer are actually not far from where that trail camera is on their feet, like in the daylight probably. So I guess just to think about this, like if you're getting deer, this is how I found a buck called Teenager in 2017 that I really was after for 3 years, and never saw him, but I had tons of trail camera pictures of him. But I ended up, long story short, had very good shot at him one day, and I had an acoustic gig that I played because I was broke. I needed the money. It was in November. I got the exact wind I needed for the location that I was hunting him at, which was a northeast, which is kind of odd. And he showed up at 3:30 p.m. on the day I was out in Dallas playing a gig. And I would have no doubt been there if I hadn't had that gig. And I probably would have shot that deer at, kind of early afternoon, 3:30, right in front of my camera, right in front of where I was hanging that stand. But originally when I found that buck the year before, or the January before that, he was really close to a food source at dark. But he was daylighting back in that area, not only in that next year, but also I moved my camera in January when I picked that one up and moved it further back into the cover where I assumed he was coming from and found him right off the bat in daylight. So that's something to think about, is like this deer was not killable at all whatsoever, 400 yards away, but he was like very much daylighting 400 yards away from that original camera placement. So just something to think about is like, just because you look at a picture and you're like, oh, it's dark, I may not ever have a shot at that buck, doesn't mean you can't go find him elsewhere as long as you have permission to get further back in from that food source or whatever, whatever you've got going on. But just understanding which way he's coming from and then moving the camera to another plausible spot. And if it doesn't work out for you in a week, you don't see him again in a week or two, then change it to a different spot, same distance, 150, 200 yards, and just try to backtrack him all the way back to where you can find him in daylight. But that's a good question. You guys ever done a tack event? I'm hoping to draw a Colorado deer tag and can't decide if it'd be worth making the trip for tack this summer. Deep Dive and Dak is who that is. We did tack in San Antonio. It was fun, but I wouldn't say it helps you shoot better if that's what you're asking. I would just shoot a bunch as much as possible, stretch it out as much as possible, shoot long shots. If you have to shoot in the backyard and you can't shoot long shots, you got 20 yards, then draw a tiny dot, on that target and try to hit that dot at 20. Don't just take a big 4-inch circle and think, oh, I'm hitting that good at 20, But really focus that's what you have to do on a 60-yard shot, is really focus and really dial it. So kind of do that and try to hit that small little pencil, tiny dot. Let's go back over here to the Instagram questions. Okay, we've got Bobby Nolan 94. How much sign do you actually want before setting up there? I don't have game cameras. Man, sign is just not a huge indicator for me most of the time. I've said this a couple times recently, so sorry if it's redundant, but really, I think map scouting, e-scouting, whatever you want to call it, is pretty underrated, in all honesty. I think that you can't just... Here's the thing that maybe I haven't been clear on. E-scouting or map scouting it can't be done alone. You have to have the map out while you're walking property of all kinds. And then you understand better what all this looks like on the map. You can visualize it in your head when you're looking at it on the map. And then you get better at that, and you can go new places where you haven't seen it but have a decent idea of what this is going to look like on the map before you get there. Still, there's always surprises, right? But I would say that probably the number one thing is to find spots you have confidence on the map. And then if there's sign there, then you can be really confident. And it doesn't have to be a lot depending on what you're looking for. If you're looking for a place that a buck is, sometimes it's not where 3 family groups of does are, like early in the season or whatever. So there might not be much sign there. And there's not going to be rubs. There might be old rubs from last year. But, if there's a decent faint trail and it leads to a bedding area that's half mile from a food source, then, and you've got it, like you feel like that's the spot for a bedded buck to come through on his way to that food source, and you pick that from the map, then go with it and feel good about it, And if you don't see a deer, And it's tough because I know I have an idea of some of the stuff that you hunt, Bobby, because of Bobby came out to one of our live events several years ago. We got to meet him, and he was, we were local, like in the North Texas area, and so I feel like I know at least what the country he hunts is like, as far as like that there's not a whole lot of bucks, so you can go several days without seeing a deer and not really have great confidence that you're in a bad spot even, but you might be in a good spot and you just haven't seen deer, because that's a good spot on Texas Public sometimes, so anyway, I would say, like, again, going back to this, is practice some of your scouting with the map in hand and understanding what everything looks like that you've scouted. And then you get a better chance of, understanding that not only what everything looks like, but then, okay, here's a good attribute, whatever that is. Let's say it's what a persimmon looks like, a persimmon, grove or whatever they call them, on the map, because you just went to some persimmons this summer and looked at them on the map. That's what they look like on the map. Well, now you can go to any persimmon, thicket or grove and understand that on the map that's probably persimmons. It looks a lot like this other persimmon thicket. Okay, cool. So now you've got a good idea that early season there might be, or mid-season even, there might be deer eating those persimmons. Okay, so we're good there. That's one thing, though. You need multiple things. Okay, why else would deer be there? Well, there's a wheat field or whatever that's a half mile from there. And then on the other side of those persimmons from that wheat field, there's some really thick stuff right next to a creek. Okay, well, we've got some pieces of puzzle that might be put together. There's kind of hypothetical, but we've got this thick stuff over here, this persimmon thicket, and this wheat field on the other side of it. He's potentially going to hit that persimmon thicket on the way to the wheat field. And it gives you an idea that, like, you can sit close to those persimmons and get a shot at the deer as a bow hunter, if he comes into that. It gives you a place to sit in between that wheat field a half mile away in the thicket. That has a good chance of that deer coming. So you get there. You see that some persimmons have fallen. There's some deer droppings. There's lots of tracks, or even a few tracks. It's a good sign.
O'Reilly Auto Parts are in the business of keeping your car on the road. O'Reilly Auto Parts offer friendly, helpful service and the parts knowledge you need for all your maintenance and repairs. If you're confused about what part you need, like what wipers are going to be the best, what replacement headlights are going to be the best, go into O'Reilly and talk to the people that work there, because they're great and they're super friendly, and they'll get you squared away where you walk out knowing you got the right thing. They've got thousands of parts and accessories in stock, either in-store or online, so you never have to worry if you're in a jam. Do you need your windshield wipers replaced? You need a brake light fixed? You need some quick service? They'll help you find the right part or point you to the nearest local repair shop for help. The professional parts people at O'Reilly Auto Parts are your one-stop shop for all things auto do-it-yourself, and you can find what you need in-store or online. Stop by O'Reilly Auto Parts today or visit us at O'ReillyAuto.com/MeatEater. That's O'ReillyAuto.com/MeatEater. Hey, if you guys like to cook outdoors, and you oughta, you should check out the Weber Slate rust-resistant griddle. Now, this is a good innovation here, and it solves a real problem, okay? So this is a carbon steel cooktop that's safe for metal tools, like a griddle on your grill. It's pre-seasoned with food-safe oils and ready to cook on right out of the box. There's no use of coatings, okay? You can use metal tools to flip, press, and scrape without worry. It's the griddle that stays ready, not rusty. Now, the problem with griddles, everything rusts. No one talks about how bad everything rusts. The reason they don't, because they couldn't fix it until now. Well, Weber's new rust-resistant technology your Weber grill will last for years. When used, the carbon steel griddle hardens and bonds the surface, reducing the ability for moisture to collect and rust to form. With the new Weber Works Prep Cook and Store system, you can keep cooking and cleaning supplies handy, carry food and condiments from the kitchen to the griddle, and even convert the side table into a prep station. Get fired up for your new Weber Slate rust-resistant griddle. There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store, or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today.
What would be a good release for a bow? Okay. Josh Cochran. I've used Cobra for most of my life, but my dad gave me a Cobra and I used it for 15 years. And then Jake at Cobra sent us some Cobras a few years back, and I've been using them ever since. But I had two that were the same. I think it's called the Wilderness or something from Cobra. I had two that were same, and I lost one. I know where it's at, but it's like way into some public land that I took a jacket off and took the release off and then left the release whenever I took off out of there. And I didn't want to go back and get it. So I lost one of these two releases. So I'm thinking about potentially trying a new release. I've heard good things about True Ball. But again, anybody who wants to comment in the comment section on YouTube can do that and give that guy some ideas if they have good release or bad release. Don't trash anybody, but just say, I wouldn't recommend this or whatever. Okay. Back over here to Instagram. We got a few more here. Bobby also wants to know, how do I determine my primary shooting lanes when I'm picking a tree? This is a great question, and I like this. I spend a lot of time at the tree before I set up in it. Every new camera guy that I hunt with over the years, every time it's like the first time that I hang with a camera guy, I say, hey, like once we get to the tree, I start looking up and I go, all right, this is going to almost be like a little bit comical, but this might take a second. So just let me think, and don't think that I'm weird or that I'm an idiot or whatever. I just want to think through everything before I actually commit to getting up into a tree. And I'm not saying I nail it every time, but there's a couple of things that you can rely on. And one, I think, is knowing that as a right-hander or a left-hander, this is your strong side, so this is where your platform is going to go. And then, trying your best to visualize where your shooting lanes will be without having to go out to where the deer would be when you shoot it. Now, I oftentimes, if not almost all the time, I have an idea of which trail I actually expect this deer to come down. And so that gives me a really good idea of where my shooting lanes are going to be, or need to be, right? So it helps me to pick which tree I'm going to be in. I like to have less cover than more cover if I have to choose. If I have to choose to give up stuff, I would sit lower if I could sit kind of in between the crotch of a tree, that didn't have leaves on it, than if I was to go up the tree another 6 foot. If I was to go up the tree another 10 foot, it might be a different deal. You know what I mean? But I would sit 6 foot lower to be in the crotch, as long as it wasn't like 6 foot off the ground, probably, So just some, you make your own decisions, but I like to be able to be fairly hidden. And I like cover a lot, but on public, I would rather have shooting lanes over on a place I'm unfamiliar with than a place, than have a place that, or a tree that cuts off most of my shooting lanes. And sometimes that's the way it is. But one of my best tips is I carry a big, long bunch of paracord so that if I need to kind of lasso a limb and tie it back a little bit to give me a little better shooting lane or a shooting lane period, then I do that from time to time. And I've actually called in a big buck in Iowa one year, 2019, doing that, and he caught us in our last minute of setup. I had put my jacket on, and Casey looked over and said, "Don't move." And as soon as he said that, took off. Big buck. So, you kind of run that risk, but at least you set up and got some lanes if that's the case. So it looks like it's about to tornado out there. So anyway, that's kind of some thoughts there. And I think that you just have to understand that, like, you don't have to get as high as you can. And if you can say that spot in that tree up there is for sure, I can get to it with my sticks, then that'll help you out a lot. If you're like, I don't know if I can get to that spot with my sticks, it's pretty high. If you get up there and you can't get to it and you got to sit up lower, and well, now you don't know where your shooting lanes are as much. You know what I mean? But I would say I don't like ground scent, but if you can walk 5 or 10 yards out from the tree and not quite get to that trail that you're thinking the deer are coming down, and see and get a pretty even better perspective on where those lanes are, that's probably a pretty helpful thing. Let's go back over here to YouTube real quick. What camera would you suggest for a beginner self-filming hunter? Mics, the whole deal. I might need to get my dog inside, unfortunately. But I'm going to try to get through this. I would say, an iPhone's a pretty good deal, but GoPro, if you really want, good stuff, there you can get cameras at Walmart, and you can probably buy like little, what they call dead cat, or, windscreens that are like fuzzy. You can buy those and they'll like tape onto your camera mic so that you don't get too much wind noise and stuff. And you can just get like a $250 Panasonic or JVC or something at Walmart. It'll do pretty good. Or you can get, like, if you really want to spend $2,000, you can get a decent lens that'll go on a Sony A series, like a A6700 or something like that, and that'll do awesome. I mean, we'll probably end up using one of those for like our 5th camera this year or something like that. So back over to Instagram. And that was a good question, Bobby. I like that question a lot, and I hope I answered it okay. If I didn't, just ask me again. I'll try to answer it better. Hunter Kelly says, how do you make a small Florida buck look like a big Midwest buck? Well, I don't know. I don't think that it really works that way, but you can definitely long arm him, and people will either call you out or just be happy that you tried to make the deer look big to give it as much respect and make it as much focus as possible. So who knows, man? I like to shoot deer because they're fun to shoot, not necessarily to, make my buddies understand what I went through or how big the deer is. I mean, a big deer's awesome, and I do show it off to my buddies, but like everybody's going to see your deer different than you do, pretty much. Nobody's going to see it nearly as special as you do, even if it's a monster. Heart of Texas Bow Hunter says, best way to get success pics at night with no long exposure. There's a LITE that a company called Neewer makes. It's Neewer. And they mount on top of a camera. I would say get a couple of those. They're cheap. And get 2 of them, put one, tape one or rubber wire one to a tree and use the other one on top of the camera. Get as much light as possible. That's the way we take night pictures, is just as many lights as we can carry in. Sometimes it's 1, sometimes it's 4 or 5. Over here at YouTube again, what are your thoughts on the 350 for those straight wall states? Looking at picking up one for Indiana hunting. I've heard good things, but I'm not a gun nut by any stretch of the imagination. Casey would probably have a better answer for this, but I think that it's going to kill deer if you can get them in within your range and shoot them in the right spot, pretty much. So whatever is your range for a good accurate shot. When and where is your next live event? This is a good question because we've been talking about it lately, and I'm thinking that we may do a couple later this summer, potentially get together, do some Q&A type stuff like this, look at some maps, potentially even, do some giveaway stuff for product or gear or whatever, and have a dinner and just hang out and chat, maybe watch a video that hasn't been released, which we've got several of those right now that are already, some of them even edited. So yeah, I would say like probably late July, or mid-August or something like that. Be looking for something at least, and it probably would be in Texas. I'd like to go all over and do them, but I don't know for sure where like a lot of people think we're cool or we want to do, want to hang out with us or listen to us or whatever. But I know in the DFW we've done them before and it's done pretty well. Maybe Austin, something like that would be cool too. If you have some ideas, let me know. Back over here, last Instagram question that I have, or that I wrote down. Is it possible to hunt water when there's a creek running through the property? That's old Charlie Vanderbleek. Yeah, it is. It is for sure. In fact, I don't think running water is a very preferential drinking source for most deer. I think they like stuff that's very stagnant still. They'd rather drink out of an algae pond probably than a running creek, I think. So yeah, it's definitely a possibility. I would monitor it with a trail camera if you can and see if they're drinking out of it and if they're doing it in daylight and try to make a thing happen. We almost killed one on Texas Public on water in the opening weekend, but I say almost. We had them very patterned throughout September, and then opening about like literally a week or less before opening day. I don't know if everybody just started going out there and hanging their stands and looking around, snooping and stuff, but they were knocked off their pattern in like the last week of September. Otherwise, we would have been dialed and killed a deer on water. It would have been really cool. Back over here to the YouTube crowd. What would you consider a shooter buck for East Texas? Private. 13 inches. 13 inches wide. That's the rule, right? In all honesty, I'm probably looking at something that's like in that Pope and Young range, Maybe doesn't score net Pope and Young, but, 120 plus maybe. Just depends on the property and what you got around. And for me, like, I don't get to hunt here all that much in East Texas, and because we're just moving around so much. So I may shoot something a little bit smaller than somebody else might, or because I've already shot a bunch of deer, I might not shoot something that's 120. I might want to shoot something that's 135 or something, So, but I like stuff that's heavy. I talked about this morning. I think of 3 attributes when I think of a deer that I like. One, if they have these 3 attributes, it doesn't really matter much what they look like. They're going to look good to me. Mass, decent G2s, decent beams. Because decent G2s and beams look, if you're on YouTube, kind of look like this, right? It's the frame. The G2s and the beams of the frame. If he's got good G2s, but he's got tiny G3s, his frame looks good. Like, he looks like a respectable buck, you know what I mean? And then when he turns sideways, mass, especially is something you see, especially if it carries much at all. And his 2s still have that frame look, right? He goes up high. So mass, beams, and 2s, and everything else is just bonus for me. Let's see. Josh Cochran, taking a youth first time bow hunting. Any tips? Hunt a feeder and tell them they got to be really still whenever deer come in. But they're going to see a lot of deer and they're going to have a fun time. That's what I would do. If you can't hunt a feeder, I would just try to be in a spot where there's a lot of deer around, whatever that is, whether it's a field or whatever. If it's a field, then not corn, but beans or something that you can see the deer even if they're 150 yards away, and just give them a lot to look at. I think that's a good thought. So yeah, and then tell them, just try to talk them through everything, go ahead and draw, go ahead and draw, go ahead and do this, get your bow ready, clip on, just give them little whisper hints, excuse me, as you go, and try to kind of, put them in a good position to actually get a good shot off without a deer being just keyed up, right? Drew, I don't know how to say your last name, Bajumpa. I don't even know if that's a real name or not. Might just be like a made up name that you put on here. But it's cool if it is. I feel like I've missed a bunch of your 2023 and 24 content. Is most of it still being held back? Yes, most of it. So at some point we can only edit so much when we're going in so many different places and hunting, and everybody's involved just filming, right? So it's hard to get stuff out in the season, especially once we get to November. So it's not like intentionally held at that point a lot of times, but some of the meat eater stuff is, they hold it intentionally, but some of the, element stuff, it gets held back because we can't get to it to edit it until after the season. And then nobody cares about deer hunting until from after the season till, August or September. So it's like, we just hold it to put it out as hype for the next season because everybody wants to see deer hunting videos in August and September. And if we don't have anything new, then I hate disappointing people, so that's kind of why. But yes, there's a bunch of stuff still. Like anything we've shot in 24 has pretty much not come out yet. Almost anything except for on the element. Like the lead on meat eater stuff that comes out is going to be a lot longer than element stuff in a lot of cases. Not always, but most cases. Just because it's a lot of people putting stuff on there. There's Callahan, there's Ranella, Clay Newcomb, Mark Kenyon, Tony. A bunch of these people are so fitting in that calendar on their channel is difficult, and there's a delay there. So if you want to watch stuff that is more timely, sometimes the element is the place to do it. But we still have like a lot of 24 stuff or 23 stuff that from deer season that will come out. And there's some cool stuff we've been looking at. We've been really working on the deer hunting stuff the last week or so, and it is awesome. I can't wait.
Hey, everybody knows Weber grills. I've been using Weber grills my whole life, and check it out. They got a pellet grill, the Weber Searwood pellet grill. Now, with a pellet grill, you can smoke, roast, and sear on the same grill. You can go from low and slow, on smoke boost mode, or crank this thing all the way to a heat sear at 600 degrees. It's got a full grate sear zone, so you can put more food on the flame. Get fired up for your new Weber Searwood pellet grill.
Market House has the cleanest, leanest, juiciest meat and seafood shipped to your home overnight. Expect the service of a local butcher and the convenience of a large supplier. Unlike many online butchers, you can grab just one meal's worth or lock in for a subscription box. Choose from grass-fed and grass-finished beef, American Wagyu, free-range poultry, grass-fed lamb, wild-caught king crab, seafood, and more.
For 15% off your first order, use code COUNTRY at checkout. Just visit markethouse.com.
That's MarketHouse.com and use the code COUNTRY.